You know that kind of heavy silence that presses against your chest, even when everything around you seems normal? That's exactly where my story begins. I was standing in the kitchen holding a coffee cup I wasn't even drinking from, just staring out the window. I had no idea my life was about to completely fall apart. No idea that the family I had built for over a decade was about to shatter and that I wouldn't just lose my husband, but my daughter too. Ethan and I had been married for 6 years. We had been in each other's lives for 12. When I met him, Lily, his daughter from his first marriage, was just 6 years old. She had lost her mother not long after she was born, and stepping into that role, loving her, raising her, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I never once thought of her as my stepdaughter. She was simply my daughter. We didn't have a perfect life, but it was ours. When Ethan lost his job 8 months ago, I promised him I would carry us until he figured things out. He told me he wanted to start his own business, his dream for years, and I believed him. Without a second thought, I picked up extra shifts, tightened the budget, handled all the bills, all the stress, all the weight of our life. Because that's what you do for the people you love. A couple of weeks ago, Ethan said he had to leave town for a few days for a big meeting with a potential investor. He said it was important. Critical, if he nailed this deal, our future could finally begin. I believed him. I booked the flight, I reserved the hotel, and I sent him off with nothing but trust and encouragement. I even joked, "Bring us home a miracle." God, how stupid I feel now. The day before Ethan was supposed to return, something happened that I still can't explain. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was just bad luck. I was tidying up Lily's room. She had left her phone on her bed while she was making a sandwich downstairs. And when the screen lit up, I glanced over without thinking. It was a text from Ethan. "Thanks for covering for me. Coming back tomorrow." My heart stuttered. At first, I thought maybe they were planning a surprise for me. My birthday was coming up, and I let my curiosity and, honestly, my childish excitement get the better of me. I unlocked her phone. I knew the passcode. She had shown it to me a dozen times when she needed help with her settings or when she forgot it herself. I told myself I'd just peek. Just a few messages. I wish I hadn't. In the chat with Ethan, I saw everything. How he had arrived safely. How he had met Rachel, not an investor, but a woman. How thankful he was that Lily had convinced me about the whole fake meeting story so I would pay for his trip. I stood there staring at the words, the way you stare at a fire that's already burning down your house. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The worst part wasn't even Ethan's betrayal, it was Lily's, the little girl I had tucked into bed when she had nightmares. The teenager I had taught to drive. The young woman I had celebrated just weeks ago with a brand new car. A car I had paid for with my own savings while pretending it was from both her parents. She knew. She helped him lie to me. She chose blood over love. I felt my stomach twist, cold and sick. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But instead, I put the phone exactly where I found it, smoothed the bed sheets like nothing had happened, and walked out of the room. If there's one thing I've learned when the ground gives way under your feet, you don't freeze. You move. I grabbed my car keys, drove straight to the bank, and closed the joint account Ethan and I had set up years ago for family savings. Retirement college for Lily. Funny how all those dreams felt like ashes. Now I transferred every penny into my own account. Some of it had technically been his share, but after 8 months of paying every single bill, every single grocery run, every single birthday gift, I figured I'd already earned it, every last dollar. Driving home afterward, I finally allowed myself to cry big, ugly sobs in the car where no one could see. But by the time I pulled into the driveway, I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and smiled like nothing had happened. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, when Ethan walked through that door, everything would change, and he had no idea it was coming. The next morning felt like walking toward a funeral I hadn't even been invited to. Only this time, it was my own. I woke up before Dawn made coffee. I barely touched and sat alone at the kitchen table staring at the clock. Every tick sounded louder than it should have, like it was counting down to something I couldn't stop. When Ethan finally walked through the door, suitcase in hand, fake exhaustion on his face, I almost laughed. He didn't know. He thought he still had me wrapped around his finger, and Lily, she came downstairs a few minutes later, her hair still messy from sleep, giving me that same sheepish smile she always did when she thought she was being cute. I wanted to cry right there, but I didn't. Instead, I calmly asked both of them to sit down in the living room. I remember the way Ethan's eyebrows pulled together concerned. I remember Lily tilting her head like a confused little girl. God, if they only knew. I pulled out the paperwork, the bank documents, the title to the car, and I placed them carefully on the coffee table between us. "I closed the joint account yesterday," I said, my voice eerily steady. And I'll need the car keys back, Lily. It's no longer yours. Silence, thick, heavy, cutting through the room like a knife. Ethan was the first to react. He shot to his feet, hands waving in the air, trying to explain. It was innocent. Rachel was just a friend. He didn't want me to worry. Lie after lie spilled from his mouth, each one more pathetic than the last. I sat there unmoving, watching the man I once loved degrade himself into nothing more than a cornered animal. When he finally ran out of words, I spoke. I saw the messages, I said, and I don't need to hear any more lies. I turned to Lily. The girl I'd celebrated, protected, loved, she couldn't even look at me. She just stared down at her lap, twisting the hem of her shirt like a child caught stealing candy. Both of you, I said quietly, have betrayed me. You used me, and I don't want either of you in my life anymore. I wish I could tell you that they accepted it gracefully, but they didn't. They cried, they pleaded, they begged me to forgive them, to just talk about it. Ethan promised counseling, Lily promised she'd explain. Both of them promised things they should have promised before they shattered everything we had. I stood up feeling like I was standing outside my own body. I told them they needed to leave, or I would. And then, like some kind of tragic slow-motion movie, I watched them pack up their things. I watched Ethan shove clothes into a suitcase. He could barely zip. I watched Lily throw her belongings into a trash bag, her face red and blotchy from crying. I didn't say a word. I didn't lift a finger to help. I just stood there holding myself together with nothing but sheer willpower when they were finally gone. When the door clicked shut behind them, the house felt dead. Not quiet, dead. I collapsed onto the floor in the hallway, sobbing so hard I thought my lungs might give out. It wasn't just losing Ethan, it wasn't just losing Lily, it was losing the future I had believed in, the family I had fought for, the home I thought I had built with love. I had spent 12 years loving these people. 12 years of birthdays, late-night homework, help, hospital visits, vacations, Christmas mornings gone, wiped out with a few lies and a few texts, and one business trip. The loneliness was overwhelming everywhere I looked. The living room, the kitchen, the stairs, everything screamed their absence at me. Even the stupid coffee mugs in the sink felt like a betrayal. That night, I called my parents and told them everything. I barely made it through the story before breaking down again, and my dad, bless him, didn't say, "I told you so." Even though he probably should have, he just listened, and then he started making calls. By the next afternoon, I had an appointment with a divorce attorney. Everything moved so fast after that. Filing papers, changing locks, blocking numbers, but the ache, the grief moved slower. It hung around my neck like a weight I couldn't shake off. Even worse, Ethan and Lily didn't just disappear every single night like clockwork. They would show up at my doorstep, begging, crying, sometimes together, sometimes just Ethan, sometimes just Lily. And every single night I locked myself in my bedroom, curled up in bed, and waited for it to end. I didn't have the strength to call the police. I didn't have the strength to scream at them to leave me alone. All I could do was survive, 1 hour at a time, one night at a time. I felt like a ghost inside my own life, trapped in a house that wasn't a home anymore. The worst part, some tiny broken part of me wanted to open the door, wanted to believe the tears were real, wanted to pretend we could somehow rewind everything, go back to the life I thought we had. But deep down, I knew there was no going back, and if I didn't fight for myself now, there might not be anything left to save. After a while, the knocking stopped. The begging stopped. And all that was left was silence, but not the heavy, suffocating silence from before. This was different. This silence felt like a beginning. The night I decided to open the door, not to let Ethan in, but to tell him that I had officially filed for divorce. Something shifted inside me. I wasn't the same woman who had sat at the kitchen table crying over betrayal. I wasn't the same woman who had frozen in the hallway. While the people I loved packed up their lives and left, I was. Someone new, someone who knew that survival wasn't enough. I had to fight. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw things. I simply told him, "It's over. Find yourself a lawyer." And then I shut the door, and this time I locked it inside and out. Of course, Ethan didn't make it easy. A few days later, my attorney called to tell me that Ethan had officially responded to my petition and he wasn't happy. Apparently, he and Lily felt entitled to the car I had bought for her. They also wanted a share of the money I had rightfully moved from our joint account. And as if that wasn't enough, Ethan had the audacity to demand alimony because he was unemployed, and I hadn't given him enough time to adjust to our separation. I remember sitting in my lawyer's office, holding the printed response in my hands. Feeling my anger bubble up in a way that surprised me. He had cheated, he had lied, he had used me, and now he thought he could drain me even more. No, absolutely not that night. Fueled by a mix of rage and heartbreak, I came up with a plan. I called Ethan late, pretending to be upset, vulnerable, maybe a little tipsy. I made my voice crack. I talked about how much it hurt to read the demands in his petition, how it felt like our entire marriage had meant nothing to him. And just like I had predicted, Ethan Ever, the opportunist, jumped at the chance to spin his own sad little story. He started crying on the phone, telling me that he never meant for things to get this bad, that Rachel meant nothing, that they had only met once in person, that he was just coping because life had been so hard lately. He begged me to consider canceling the divorce, said we could go to couples counseling, start over, and while he sobbed and confessed, I hit record because somewhere deep down, past all the heartbreak, all the loneliness, all the noise, I knew the truth. Ethan wasn't sorry he cheated, he was sorry he got caught. When the call ended, I sat there staring at my phone, the recording file saved and blinking back at me. Proof that he had betrayed me. Proof that he had tried to manipulate me even now. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not a sad smile, not a bitter one, a real one. 2 days later, we sat across from each other at a mediation meeting. Ethan looked smug, like he thought he still had a chance to walk away with my money, my car, my dignity, until my lawyer pressed play. The room filled with Ethan's own voice, his tearful confession, his admissions, his pathetic excuses. I watched the color drain from his face, watched his mouth open and close like a fish gasping for air. He knew it was over. The mediator suggested a break, but I didn't even need it. I sat there calmly sipping my coffee while Ethan's lawyer whispered furiously into his ear. After that day, the calls stopped, the texts stopped, the door stayed blessedly silent. But even though I had won a major battle, I still felt hollow inside, because beating Ethan didn't undo the years I had spent loving a lie. It didn't bring back the girl who used to call me Mom when she thought no one was listening. It didn't fix the empty spaces they left behind. A couple days later, I received a text from Lily. It wasn't an apology, not really. It was more like guilt tripping. She said it was nasty of me to give Ethan false hope with that late night call. She said he had really believed I might forgive him, that I had manipulated his feelings just to win. And for a split second, her words pierced through me like a knife. Because no matter how hard I tried to remind myself, some part of me still saw her as my little girl. But then I remembered, she wasn't the little girl I had tucked into bed anymore. She wasn't the teenager who used to sneak into my room to cry after a bad dream. She was a grown woman now, and she had made her choice. She had chosen to side with the man who had lied, cheated, and used me. Just like Ethan had made his. They had both made their beds, and now they would have to lie in them. Healing isn't a straight line. It's not like one morning you just wake up and everything feels okay again. It's messy, it's slow, and sometimes it feels like it's never going to happen. The days after mediation were some of the loneliest of my life. Even though I had won, technically, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt more like standing alone on a battlefield surrounded by the wreckage of a life I used to love. The house felt too big, too empty. The silence wasn't comforting anymore. It was deafening. Every corner of that house held memories I couldn't escape. The kitchen table where Lily used to do her homework, the couch where Ethan and I used to binge watch bad TV shows, the staircase where we'd all sit on Christmas morning bleary-eyed and laughing. It hurt to breathe inside those walls. My parents called every day checking on me. Friends dropped by with casseroles and wine and bad jokes. I smiled, I thanked them, I pretended. But when they left, the loneliness crept back in thick and heavy. It wasn't just about losing Ethan. It wasn't even just about losing Lily. It was about losing the future I had believed in, the dreams I had built in my head, the life I thought was mine. There were nights when I wondered if I had made a mistake, when I thought maybe, just maybe, I should have tried harder to fix things. Maybe I should have forgiven. Maybe I should have fought for them. But deep down, I knew I was the only one who ever fought for us, and I was done fighting alone. Little by little, I started making changes. I found a new apartment, something small, cozy, and most importantly, mine. Packing up the old house was harder than I thought it would be. Every item I touched was a memory I had to say goodbye to. But every box I taped shut felt like a step forward too. I threw out the coffee mugs we had bought together, donated the couch we had cuddled on, sold the bed we used to share. I kept only what was truly mine, only what made me feel safe, only what made me feel me. Moving into my new place felt surreal. For the first time in over a decade, I was alone, truly alone. No one else's needs to take care of, no one else's dreams to prioritize, no one else's lies to excuse. Just me, and it was terrifying, but it was also kind of beautiful. I painted the walls the color I wanted, a soft, peaceful blue. I bought mismatched furniture that made me smile. I filled the kitchen with plants I wasn't even sure I could keep alive. I let myself take up space in a way I hadn't allowed myself to before. There were days I cried so hard I thought I'd never stop. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I would ever feel whole again, but there were also mornings where I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about Ethan or Lily at all the day before. And those mornings started to stack up one after another like tiny victories. I threw myself into work, into hobbies, into reconnecting with friends I had neglected for too long. I started saying yes to invitations instead of making excuses. I started taking long walks just because I could. I started dreaming about things that had nothing to do with anyone else's plans. Most importantly, I started trusting myself again. It didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen all at once. But slowly, painfully, I began to stitch myself back together. There were setbacks, of course. Days when the weight of what I had lost crushed me all over again. Days when a random song or a scent or a memory would bring me to my knees. But healing isn't about never hurting again. It's about learning that you can survive the hurt. It's about realizing that no one else gets to define your worth. That you are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if you love them once. Especially if you loved them once. I wasn't there yet, not completely, but for the first time in a long time, I believed I could get there. And that belief, fragile and flickering as it was, felt like hope. It's strange looking back now how quietly life can rebuild itself. Not with some big dramatic fireworks moment, but in small, almost invisible ways. A little over 2 years have passed since I signed those divorce papers, since I packed up my old life into boxes and walked away from the wreckage, and somehow, I'm happier now than I ever thought I could be after the divorce was finalized. I made a decision that surprised even myself. I moved. Not just across town, not just a few miles down the road. I packed up everything I owned into a moving truck and drove across state lines to a brand new city, a brand new life. I needed a clean slate. Someplace where I wasn't the woman whose husband cheated. Someplace where every coffee shop and street corner didn't hold a painful memory. I didn't have a grand plan. I didn't have a checklist or a roadmap. All I knew was I wanted to live, really live. For the first time in years, my life wasn't about surviving. It was about creating. I used the money I had saved, the same money I once thought would fund our retirement together, to fund my own dreams. Instead, I traveled. I hiked mountains I couldn't even pronounce. I dipped my toes into oceans I had only ever seen in pictures. I laughed, really laughed in ways I hadn't allowed myself to for so long. Somewhere along the way, I started sharing little snapshots of my journey online. I didn't think much of it at first. A few photos here, a few travel tips there. But somehow, somewhere, people started to listen. One video went viral, then another. Before I knew it, I had a small but fierce little community cheering me on. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that maybe, just maybe, my story wasn't over yet. Maybe it was just beginning. Today, I make my living doing something I love, traveling, creating, sharing little pieces of my world with others, not because I have to, not because someone else expects it, but because it makes me feel alive. I don't know what Ethan or Lily are doing now. I don't ask. I don't look them up. I don't wonder if they miss me. Because honestly, I don't miss them. I miss the people I thought they were, the family I thought I had, but not the reality. The truth is, sometimes we grieve for things that never really existed the way we believed they did, and that's okay. That's part of healing too. There are still days when I feel a twinge of sadness, when a certain song or a certain smell pulls me back into the past, but now the memories don't break me. They just remind me how far I've come. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not bitter. I'm grateful. Grateful that I got out. Grateful that I chose myself. Grateful that I didn't settle for a life that wasn't truly mine. If you had told me 3 years ago, when I was crying alone in that empty house, that I would end up here, I wouldn't have believed you. I would have laughed through my tears and said, not me, not ever. But here I am, alive, thriving, hopeful, and maybe, just maybe, happier than I ever thought possible. And if you were me standing at that crossroads with your heart shattered at your feet, would you have chosen the same path? Or would you have turned back? If you were me, what would you have done?